Welcome to the Startup Grind.
This session is on work-life balance, so we're going to talk about a range of things, but I wanted to talk just a little bit about, tell us about how SV Angel came to be, how you met Ron Conley. We were talking about relationships a lot with this event. How did you meet Ron? How did you develop that relationship to what it is today, to kind of founding that?
Sure. So the prior speaker mentioned serendipity, and I think all of this was just dumb luck. I was working at Google at the time. This was around 2005. I was interested in online video and was working on some online video projects. Ron was as interested in online video as he is in social media today. And somehow we got connected because we had some overlapping interests, and we just got along. They say the Korean are the Asian Irish. I'm Korean, he's Irish. And so there was definitely a kinship. And all joking aside, I always respected his approach towards startups and towards investing. Thought it was unique. And from there, I think a relationship just developed because I think we have a similar approach and value set.
As an entrepreneur, you experience these big highs and these big lows. What about as a venture capitalist? What are some of the highs that you've experienced in being at SV Angel, starting SV Angel, and then what are some of the lows that you've experienced there as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely hard to compare the two. One of the reasons why, or the main reason why I'm in my current role is because my dad started his own company, and I've seen him do it. I've seen his ups and downs, and I just said, I can't do that. That's not, it's too much. From an investor standpoint, certainly some of the highs are, or maybe I'll tell a story. One time, Ron and I were having dinner, and it was late at night, so it wasn't really dinner, and so I just was like, so why do you still do this? Like, you're at a certain age, your kids are grown up, you have grandkids, you've seen it all. And he just said, I'm addicted to this because every so often you're talking, once in a blue moon, you're talking to an entrepreneur or you're talking to somebody and they tell you what the future is going to look like. And I think that captures sort of the fun part of it, is that we work with more companies rather than less. A traditional venture capital firm works with maybe 10 to 15 companies a year. We may work with 100. And you mentioned a lot of the great companies that we work with. There are a lot of companies that haven't been as successful. But every so often you speak to a founder, and I saw this at Google as well, and they just say, this is what I'm going to do, and this is what the world's going to look like, and they're right. And that's pretty cool to be a part of that in any sort of small way. I think the downside as an investor, you think about the people that you could have worked with and you haven't. One example that I always think about is Kickstarter. Yeah. I met Perry Chen, was really captivated by the guy, and we ended up not investing. But there was something about him. We had a coffee. I drove him to the airport, and I was like, this guy, he's going to do something. But we had a lot of sort of scar tissue in this whole area, and we ended up not investing.
Yeah.
And we're still social, and that's a relationship, or those types of people that you don't work with. Perry is obviously more well-known, but there are a lot of other entrepreneurs where you say, wow, it would have been a lot of fun to work with that person. So I think that's part of the downside, those missed opportunities.
I mean, most of the venture capitalists I know, they balance their work life, this kind of, working hard and playing hard by basically taking off July and December. That's the balancing, effect. But other than, what do you do to kind of mitigate the high stress that you have and the demands that you have? You have a family and, a lot of responsibilities outside of what you're doing at SV Angel. What do you do? How do you do it?
I am like beyond lucky. Like, I feel like not only did I win a lottery ticket, I didn't even buy the lottery ticket. I just fell into something where you know, I literally wake up every day thankful for the opportunity that I have, and it's because I think my work and my play are so, the line is so blurry, and I think that's happening more and more for people generally, people who start their companies. What they're doing is real passion, and so to the degree that you can do something where that line is very blurry, I think it's, in a lot of ways, that's an optimal balance. But I also understand that not everybody has that privilege. And so for me, you know, I think I also got very lucky, and the person, my partner, my wife, is somebody that, you know, it's just, I think she understands me. She gets me. We just hang out and watch. It's pretty boring. You just watch television. You catch up on, you know, on our TiVo, but that downtime is crucial. Yeah.
Let's talk about, you're moving to LA, right? Tell us about, you know, we'll get on to a couple other subjects here. Tell us about why you're moving to LA. You know, everyone, you know, I talk to people around the world with these events that we have. It's always like, if I could just be in Silicon Valley,
right.
You know, and here you are kind of at the top of that food chain, and you're leaving. So tell us about, you know, why you're doing that, and talk to us also a little bit about SF City and what they're doing as part of San Francisco.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, I think there are two catalysts, and the first catalyst was that, you know, I'm older than I look. I'm 43. I went to graduate school in the early 90s, and, you know, I have this stereotype of serious technology companies of being here in the peninsula, in Mountain View, you know, with you know, your stereotypical engineer. And what I've observed in the last couple of years, to my chagrin somewhat, because I still live here, is that the center of gravity in technology, at least in Silicon Valley, has really moved.
Yeah.
And it's moved up north to San Francisco. And people always ask me, where's the next Silicon Valley? And I say, it is 45 minutes up north. Of our Bay Area companies and our investments, for the first time ever, more of our companies are in San Francisco than in the peninsula.
Wow.
And that's really significant. And you mentioned SF City, so one of the things that we realized is that, so you see this sea change, but you also see cities that may not be able to absorb this type of growth.
Yeah.
Whether it be New York, whether it be San Francisco, whether it be Boston, you could argue that, you know, not many tech companies have actually grown in cities, and it's because the infrastructure is not there. And so what we're doing at SF City is that we said, okay, how can we add value? And the way you can add value is you set up a bridge between the people who make those decisions and the companies. And technology companies historically haven't been that involved for a variety of reasons, mainly because they're focused on building their company. But now I think there's a recognition that, you know, if they grow to 1,000 people, their current home may not be sustainable. And so what we're trying to do at SF City is to become that bridge and to be an advocate for these companies so that San Francisco can be the next tech capital of the world.
I mean, so in this move from Silicon Valley to San Francisco is very interesting because there's this idea that young, single, talented people, they want to live in the city, they want to have things to do, whatever. But there's also this, you know, Palo Alto is as full as it's ever been, right? University is chock full. I mean, the real estate prices are through the roof. And you had startups like Stripe and Pinterest that have moved into the city, but really only because of a consequence. I'm sure there are other factors, but one of the largest was they could not find space down here. And Patrick from Stripes talked about that. They couldn't find space in Silicon Valley. So what do you, is it a matter of, why are things moving to the city, whether that's New York City or San Francisco City, you know, San Francisco proper? I mean, what, you know, is it that? Is it that it's young people, they want to be in the city? Or is it something else? What are the factors?
I don't know. I mean, I do know that I read somewhere that in 2008, for the first time ever, more people live in cities than in suburbs. So you're seeing that shift. I mean, we talk a lot about collaborative consumption. I think that captures just this notion of the younger technology user. I think their worldview is different from their predecessors. A lot of them live in cities. A lot of them have sort of a more skeptical view of larger institutions for whatever reason. A lot of them want to start their own companies. A lot of them are more interested in experiences rather than owning things.
Yeah.
And so you're seeing just more and more people interested in technology living in cities. So, again, it's hard to say, hey, that's the reason, but I think that is a trend that we're seeing, and we wouldn't be surprised if that's part of the reason why you're seeing this migration.
Let's talk about startup incubators. You guys have had as close as anyone, a relationship with Y Combinator, kind of the premier accelerator, incubator. And we're seeing now that some of these, not the premier ones, but some of them are starting to drop off. We've now had a few years, cycles of these guys. What is SV Angel's perspective on accelerators and incubators? Are more accelerators good for our startup ecosystems around the world? Is it creating more noise or more startup trash? I mean, how do you guys see that part of what's happening?
It's hard to say. We don't really, I think we're pretty agnostic when it comes to that in terms of, we've known the folks at Y Combinator for the past 5 years, and so we developed a relationship with them and understood their process and saw a lot of overlap and kinship there. But we've also invested pretty heavily in other programs as well. So for us, it's less about, this sounds sort of obvious and maybe trite, but it's more about the company and not as much about the incubator. And so in general, I think to the degree that an incubator or accelerator or program or whatever you want to call it can provide mentorship, and I think if I were a company and if I were thinking about going through one of those programs, in addition to whatever social signal that could provide, I would think about what's the chemistry like with a person who I'll be working with, because you are going to be giving up some of your company, you are going to be in a particular community, and if you don't feel like the chemistry is right, even if there's a great social signal, I may look for mentorship or guidance elsewhere.
Yeah, and you guys kind of getting out of that early stage start fund with Y Combinator. You've talked about the reasons behind that, but with all these other things happening, from the outside, somebody just looking at it has no inside knowledge of anything. It looks like a bad indicator for those guys or any incubator. If YC lowers their money, I know Paul has said they've went from 150 to 80, and he said, well, we did that because they only need 80. But you guys come out. Is that you guys? What goes behind that? Is there more to that than what it appears, or what you guys?
No, I think if you look at the other folks doing that, the larger funds, they have billions at their disposal, and we are a fund of 35 to 40 million.
Yeah.
And it was simply a numbers game. And if we had a fund of that size, I would continue it in perpetuity. But because we have limited resources, it was something that we sat down and we said, hey, what's the best way that we can remain as close with the companies and the program as possible?
Which is remaining small, because you could go raise another. You could go raise more money probably pretty easily, I would imagine. So.
Well, yeah. So I don't know about that, but yeah.
Well, yeah. So you could. If you guys wanted to, you could. But are you saying that to maintain your focus of really getting in with entrepreneurs at the early stage, you need to remain? A smaller size fund.
Yeah, we were thinking we toyed around with the idea of raising larger funds, and we just felt like, if we can just focus on one thing and stay smaller, I think that's a better game plan for us.
Let's talk about the consumer web, mobile, environment. You guys are invested in some of the best and biggest consumer web startups. We're hearing all this talk, Crunchies last week, it's the rise of the enterprise or whatever. Are you guys, if I'm a founder, I'm trying to get a startup off the ground, am I now, skating to where the puck is today if I'm jumping in to some of those categories? Are you still going to heavily invest in, in consumer? What is your take on that?
For us, I'm not going to say that's all we know, but that's definitely our specialty, or that's where we focus a lot of our energy, is on consumer internet, mobile applications, and we're just going to invest through the cycle, and that's the approach we're going to take, regardless of what's happening in the environment. So you're reading a lot about how how enterprise-based companies are getting more attention, particularly from investors, and that's just not something we pay attention to.
Yeah.
And so our approach is always, when it comes to something that's a little bit outside of our sweet spot, it's very important for us to make sure that we're investing with other investors who we know can add value, not necessarily certainly not before the money is wired, i.e. in terms of a social signal, i.e., hey, this person's investing. It's does that person add value after the check is wired? Yeah. And so, whereas a consumer, that's our sweet spot, and that's where we're going to stay.
So you're going to stay there for sure.
Yes, for sure.
And will you? I mean, is it, do you batten down the hatches and kind of wait out a little bit, or are you guys continuing to, are you charging at the consumer?
We're charging. It's important for us. I mean, we have a certain model at SV Angel. I think ours is different from others, and it's important for us to remain time diversified, to invest through the cycles, invest when we see great founders, invest in areas that we know, and not worry about sort of the macro external factors too much.
We can probably do one or two questions, Carl, if you want to get the mic to somebody, if somebody's got one. And I'll just ask you one more, David, while he's getting over there. What are you seeing right now, early stage valuations for teams with founders, prototype, a very early product? Are you still investing at that stage, or are you, and at what valuation, or are you waiting for some, market proof, to get to, Bing Gordon said right now that, the sweet spot, he said last night at our event that 10 million users is now the point for him where, he's, okay, this could be something that used to be 500,000. So where are you seeing valuations at that stage, and where are you investing on those?
Yeah, it's so hard to say, because valuations are so situational. They're so specific to that particular company.
Sure.
And so if you could take one group of companies and say, the average is X, and 18 months ago the average would have been Y.
Yeah.
But it's very much specific, so it's very hard for me to say generally where valuations are.
Are they lower or higher than, say, 18 months ago? They got to be lower, right?
Maybe a tad lower, but...
What's a tad to you? A tad to me is like $100.
It's sort of like our housing prices, up or down.
Okay.
It's like they may be up or they may be down, but in your region they may be very high and growing, with a lot of steam, and in another region they're much lower. And so I'd say 10 to 20. I don't know, 10 to 20%, but that's that I wouldn't put much stock in that answer. Yeah.
Great. Go ahead, Carl.
Hi. I agree with you that having the blurry line between work and play is a good thing. You should love what you're doing. But we all know that a startup's a roller coaster. So when you're down, your personal life a lot of times is down too. How do you manage that or separate yourself? If you had a bad investment, company you love goes under, how do you...
It's a great question. I've never said this publicly. When I was in graduate school, I had a pretty tough time. I had an illness, and it was really hard on me mentally. And I will say that one of the things that I found really helpful is I spoke to somebody. And it's just, I think that process of letting something out to somebody who is either paid to listen or a good listener is unbelievably cathartic. If you talk to people who write journals, for example, they do it for themselves, because taking that out of your body, that process is very cathartic. And I think about people like Tiger Woods, Pete Sampras. Those people have sports psychologists. Those people have swing coaches. And I think of your psyche and your emotional well-being as a muscle like any other. And so I'm a huge advocate of speaking to somebody, either a significant other or somebody who is paid to listen, because that is a process that I think it's an investment that pays off in spades.
Thank you very much. Good question. Let's give David a big round of applause. Thank you.